Leigh Whannel's new werewolf movie is finally out, and if you're like me, then you've been waiting for this one for a very long time. But was it any good, or was this a movie that never should have seen the full moon? Let's bite into Wolfman on this episode of Ringside Review. Welcome back to WWH. My name is Andrew Dreamer. Yeah, so Wolfman has finally been released after originally being announced all the way back in 2014. Obviously, that iteration of the project never came to fruition, but after the success of Whannell's The Invisible Man, Universal had renewed interest in the project, and he was brought on to write and direct this new film. As soon as this announcement was made, I was heavily invested. I love Leigh Whannell's work, and I think he's a great writer and director. So I definitely was excited to see what he could do with The Wolfman. The movie was supposed to come out last year, but got pushed back to this year, and honestly, that should have thrown up some red flags for me. This was one of my most anticipated films of the year, so I was pumped to finally get to see it last weekend, and honestly, it's kind of taken me this long to gather my thoughts. This review is going to be a little different than normal. I'm not going to spend a ton of time going through the plot, mostly because that's where most of the issues lie. That being said, you don't really have to worry about spoilers in this video. If there are any kind of areas of this rundown that kind of get into spoilers, I will let you know. But I'm just going to talk about how I felt about the overall film. Before we get going though, be sure to body slam that subscribe button as hard as you can so you never miss any of the hard-hitting, chill-inducing 5-star matches we have here at WWH. It is bell time now, so grab your popcorn and make your way to your seat. Let's head down to the ring. So I'm just going to do a quick run through of the plot. I won't spend too much time on it, like I said. You'll understand why as we get deeper into this match. So Wolfman tells the story of the Lovell family who travels to a remote house in the mountains of Oregon. Of course, just like you'd expect, this doesn't go the way they think it will. They're attacked by an unseen quote-unquote animal. They seek the safety in the home, but soon discover that the real danger may be inside the house with them. In the family, you have Blake, his wife Charlotte, and their daughter Ginger. See, Blake was injured during the attack and begins transforming into something completely unrecognizable to his family.
What was that thing, Blake?
It was like an animal, but it was standing on 2 feet.
And that's not a spoiler. I mean, it's a Wolfman movie. What else did you expect? Essentially, they spend a big chunk of the movie trying to escape without getting killed so they can get Blake medical attention. All of us watching know that won't do any good, though. You'll get your transformation scene, you'll get a few action sequences and some tense moments, but that's really about it. I told you I wouldn't spend a lot of time on the plot, and that's sort of because there's not much to talk about. With that being said, I do want to go ahead and move on to the positives now. So the first thing I want to mention in this section of the review is that Leigh Whannell's direction is still really good in this movie. I like the way that he frames his shots, I like some of the camera movements that he chooses to do, and just the overall framing of all of the sequences in the movie. I think he does a fantastic job in those areas, and he did a fantastic job in Insidious 3 in that area, he did a fantastic job with Upgrade in that area, he did a fantastic job in The Invisible Man with that area, and it is no different with Wolfman. So I just wanted to make note of that. He is a really good director, and I don't think that anything in this movie takes away from that. And one of the aspects that kind of plays into his direction of the film is the back and forth switching perspectives between Blake's perspective as he's transforming into the Wolfman and his family's perspective. It's kind of a back and forth where you kind of get his point of view from some things and then you get the family's point of view from the other, and I really like that. It creates a really good contrast of ideas and themes, and it just kind of makes you feel for all these characters in a way that you might not have felt for them had they not gone this direction.
Is that you? You scare me.
And I also gotta give some kudos to Christopher Abbott, who plays Blake in this movie. When it came time to go full-on Wolfman, he was phenomenal. He did a great job in all of these sequences when it came time to act almost feral. I think is probably the right word for that. He does a really, really good job there. And the other actor that I want to point out in this section is Matilda Firth, who plays his daughter Ginger. I think that she does a very good job as a younger child actor, and I think you really can feel her fear. I think you can feel the emotions that she's feeling, and that's always what you want, especially out of child actors. They are typically not the greatest, it seems, especially when it comes to horror movies, and that's a shame, really, because there are some really talented child actors out there. But I think Matilda Firth does a fantastic job at her role as well. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about here is the first act of the film. I'm going to try not to get too spoiler heavy in this little section here, but if you want to skip this last point, go ahead and skip forward. That's completely okay. But I really enjoy the first act of this film. It starts out with Blake as a child. He's in Oregon with his father, and they're out hunting. There are some themes and ideas that get brought up here that you expect to kind of permeate throughout the entire film, and we'll get into that as we go into the negative section. But I really enjoyed this first act. Basically everything from the opening of the film up until when they are first attacked by the werewolf. I think it is really, really good, and had the rest of the movie kept up that same level of interest for me, it would have been a completely different story from here on out. But I really did enjoy the first act of this movie. Now, on that note, we are switching gears to the negatives. Like I just mentioned in the positive section, there were a lot of ideas and themes that they really touched on heavily at the beginning of the film that really just ended up going nowhere. And that's a shame, because these ideas are something that could have really raised the stakes going later into the film, but really they were just a talking point in the first 20 minutes of the movie that did nothing to elevate the story. Kind of piggybacking on that, I also want to say that this is not a bad movie. It's not a bad movie by any stretch. I just felt like there could have been more done with it, if that makes sense. A lot of the dialogue was kind of clunky and just didn't sound natural at some points of the film, and I don't really know why that's the case. That's how it came across to me. And I gotta be honest, as I was watching this movie, I was sitting there in the theater and I was really wondering just how much time was left. And that's never a good sign when you're in the movie theater. You never want to sit there and think, oh my God, how much longer do I have to sit here through this? That's not a good feeling when you've paid your money to go see a movie in the theater, and it's just not fun. And I also gotta say, I do understand why this movie was pushed back. It almost feels like that January curse kind of coming back around, but I think that given the story and the film that they had, I understand why they decided to push it back to January of 2025. That makes sense to me now after having seen the movie. And again, I hate that I'm here talking about this. I don't like that I am being negative in this way about it, but that's just how I feel. The movie itself just almost feels incomplete to me. I feel like there were some missing chunks of the movie that we just didn't get to see, or some things that they had planned that they didn't get to film. I don't know what the case was. But after I left, I was just hoping that maybe somewhere down the road I'll find out that there is an expanded version of this film that adds so much more to it, and we'll get some just better version of the film. I don't think that that's going to be the case, but that was one of the first thoughts that popped into my head when I left. Touching on the design of the werewolf itself, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. I think it could have been done better. I think there were some CGI moments that I would have enjoyed better had they been practical. Now, there were practical effects in this movie for a lot of it, but when it came time for that CGI stuff, it just wasn't for me. I prefer the practical over the CGI any day of the week. That's no secret. But I really think that that's all I'm going to mention as far as negatives go for this movie. And again, that kind of just goes back to what I mentioned about not really having a whole lot go on in the plot. If there was more going on in the plot, then maybe there would have been more negatives. I don't have anything else really to say. Overall, I just feel like this movie had a lot of unfulfilled potential. I was so excited and hopeful going in, and I left the theater just feeling deflated. I don't even know if disappointed is the right word. I just wanted more out of this story. I love the basic premise of it and some of the ideas they started with, but the second and third acts just went nowhere in my opinion. Again, I don't think that this is a bad movie at all. I just think it needed more. I'm not going to place blame on anybody for that. That's not going to fix anything. I'm just sad, man. I need to go watch the original from 1941. Maybe that'll make me feel better. Also, if you enjoyed this movie and had a good time with it, I'm glad. I wish I had that experience with it. I really do. But that is going to wrap up this episode of Ringside Review. Let me know down in the comments your thoughts on Wolfman. Did you enjoy the film if you've seen it? And please don't let my opinions deter you from giving it a chance, though. I'll always believe in supporting films and cinemas. If you are interested in Redcon One products, I have a discount code that you can use to save 20% off of your entire order. Be sure to check that out. You can also find all of my merchandise available at prowrestlingtees.com/AndrewDreamer or right under this video. And also head over to Patreon and consider becoming a member over there, or if you'd rather, you can become a member right here on YouTube. All of the links are in the description below. Don't forget to like this video, share the video, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss any of the action here at WWH. Now that we've reviewed Wolfman, what are some horror movies that you should see before you die? Luckily, you can find out by watching the video that is appearing on your screen now. And remember, in the squared circle of horror, there are no countouts for nightmares. My name is Andrew Dreamer, and this is Wrestling with Horror.